They want to see you crack. They want the tremor in your voice, the panic in your face, the anger in your hands. Because the moment emotion takes the wheel, you become easy to control. Today, you learn the Stoic Shield, the protocol that lets you feel everything and show nothing useful. The world sold you a soft lie. They told you that real strength is instant expression, that if you feel it, you should show it, that if you are hurt, angry, pressured, betrayed, you should let it spill. That is not strength, that is exposure. In real life, the man who displays every emotion in real time becomes readable, predictable, steerable. And once people can steer your emotions, they can steer your decisions. When the deal collapses, when someone disrespects you in public, when the pressure spikes and everybody else starts leaking panic, your nervous system will beg for one thing: reaction. You must learn to treat that urge like a saboteur inside your own walls. This is what the Stoic Shield is for. Not to make you numb, not to make you robotic, but to build an iron partition between what you feel and what you do. Because power begins the moment your inner weather stops controlling your outer behavior. There is a reason they want to see your face when the pressure hits. There is a reason they watch your eyes when the plan falls apart. There is a reason they provoke you in public, delay their reply, change their tone, question your value, and then wait. They are not watching your words. They are watching your nervous system. Because the moment your emotions become visible, your position becomes weak. The moment your reaction becomes predictable, your behavior becomes steerable. And the moment other people learn what gets under your skin, they stop dealing with you directly and start dealing with your triggers. That is how men lose power without ever realizing it. Not because they are weak, because they are open. Today, we fix that. Today, you build what I call the Stoic Shield. Not the performance of being cold, not fake indifference, not dead-eyed suppression. Real emotional compartmentalization, the ability to feel the full impact of a moment without allowing that moment to take control of your mouth, your posture, your decision, or your timing, because that is the real standard, not whether you feel, whether you obey what you feel. And the first lie you need to destroy is this soft, modern fantasy that instant emotional expression is somehow proof of strength. It is not. It is exposure. Chapter 1. The Lie of Authentic Reactions. The world has romanticized reaction. They told you to wear your heart on your sleeve. They told you that blurting out exactly what you feel is healthy. They told you that if you are angry, show it. If you are hurt, reveal it. If you are under pressure, let it be seen. That advice sounds compassionate. It also makes you easy to read, and a man who is easy to read is easy to manage. Understand the difference. There is nothing wrong with emotion. Emotion is part of being alive. The problem begins when emotion becomes public before it becomes processed. That is when it stops being truth and starts becoming leakage. In private, honesty can heal. In the arena, uncontrolled honesty can cost you position. Business does not reward the most emotionally transparent man. Conflict does not reward the most emotionally transparent man. Negotiation does not reward the most emotionally transparent man. Pressure rewards the man whose face does not reveal the war inside him. Because when your emotional state is visible, other people start adjusting their behavior around it. They bait it, they soften you with it, they rush you with it, they guilt you with it. They make moves based on what they know you are feeling before you have even made a decision. That is not authenticity, that is surrender. Weak men confuse expression with courage. Strategic men understand that timing is part of truth. You do not have to deny what you feel. You have to decide when, where, and whether that feeling deserves an audience. That is power. A weak man says, "This is just who I am. I react." A dangerous man says, "I feel it all, but nothing leaves me without permission." That is a different species of man, because real composure is not emotional emptiness. It is emotional command. You can be furious and still speak slowly. You can be betrayed and still keep your posture. You can feel fear in your chest and still move like stone. You can feel the heat without becoming the fire. And that is the first pattern interrupt you need burned into your mind. Your emotions are not your identity. They are just weather passing over a mountain. Read that again in your mind. Weather passing over a mountain. The weak man becomes the storm. The disciplined man remains the mountain. The storm screams. The mountain does not explain itself. And once you understand that, a brutal question appears. If your emotions are not your identity, then why are some people still able to control your behavior with a few words, a certain tone, or a certain look? Because now we arrive at the real problem. You are not just emotional, you are triggered on command. Chapter 2. The Trigger Audit. Most men think they lose control in big moments. That is not true. They lose control in patterned moments. It is rarely random. It is the same tone, the same type of disrespect, the same kind of woman, the same kind of accusation, the same public challenge, the same delay, the same silence, the same look of disappointment, the same phrase that instantly lights the fuse. That is not bad luck. That is programming. Somebody says, "Calm down," and your chest tightens. Somebody questions your competence in front of other people, and suddenly you need to defend yourself right now. Somebody pulls away, goes cold, withholds approval, and now your mind starts racing, trying to regain control. Notice what happened. They did not control your hands. They did not control your mouth. They did not control your body. They touched a button, and you did the rest. That is why the trigger audit matters, because you cannot build emotional sovereignty around a threat you have never clearly identified. So ask yourself a question that most men avoid because the answer humiliates them. Who holds the remote control to your anger right now? Who can make you abandon your standards with one sentence? Who can make you over-explain? Who can make you defend yourself too early? Who can make you chase, justify, panic, or explode? That person has access to your nervous system, and any person with access to your nervous system has partial access to your behavior. That is too much power to hand away, so begin the audit. What words trigger you? Disrespect? Dismissal? Accusation? What tone triggers you? Condescension? Coldness? Mockery? What situations trigger you? Being ignored? Being doubted? Being publicly tested? What type of person gets the fastest reaction from you? Authority figures? Lovers? Family? Competitors? Cowards who hide behind sarcasm? Do not answer like a philosopher. Answer like a tactician. Find the pattern, then go deeper. Where does the trigger hit first? Your jaw, your throat, your breathing, your stomach, your hands. The body always knows before the mouth does. That is why disciplined men study sensation, not to become soft, to catch the ambush early. The moment you can say, "My chest just tightened because I felt dismissed," the trigger loses some of its invisibility. The moment you can say, "I am being baited into defending myself," the hook stops disappearing beneath the water. The moment you can name the mechanism, you reduce its power. That is the rule. What you can name, you can interrupt. What you can interrupt, you can control. What you can control, you no longer have to fear. Most men never perform this audit. They keep calling themselves passionate. They keep calling themselves intense. They keep calling themselves real, but underneath all that language is one ugly truth. They are predictable, and predictable men are easy to provoke. But once you see your triggers clearly, the game changes. Because now you are no longer fighting ghosts. Now you know exactly where the breach is, and that is where the next move becomes everything. Because once you know what gets inside your mind, you must learn how to stop it from taking over your body. That is where we build the gap. And that is where the Stoic Shield stops being an idea and starts becoming a weapon. Chapter 3. Creating the mental gap. Now we get practical. Because awareness without mechanics is useless. Seeing the trigger is not enough. You need a physical protocol that stops emotion from jumping the fence and taking over your behavior. That protocol begins with one brutal truth. Your first feeling is often honest. Your first reaction is often a liability. That is why the gap matters. The gap is the small space between what hits you and what leaves you, between the insult and your expression, between the bad news and your tone, between the disrespect and your decision. Most men do not have that space. Stimulus comes in, reaction comes out, no filter, no delay, no command. They live like exposed wiring. Touch them in the wrong place and the whole system sparks. The Stoic Shield starts when you force a delay. Not a dramatic delay, not some theatrical silence to look mysterious. A real 3-second interruption that gives your higher mind enough time to step back into the room. 3 seconds is longer than most people think. Long enough to stop your mouth from outrunning your judgment. Long enough to stop anger from writing a sentence your future self will have to pay for. Long enough to separate impulse from intention. So here is the drill. When the trigger lands, do not answer immediately. Inhale for 3 seconds. Not a panicked breath, a controlled one. Quiet, measured, invisible if possible. Let the insult hang in the air. Let the accusation sit there. Let the room feel the pause. The silence is your shield. That moment does 2 things at once. First, it protects you from yourself. It stops the nervous system from grabbing the microphone before the mind is ready. Second, it changes the frame. Because the man who answers instantly looks reactive. The man who can hold a beat under pressure looks like he has options, and options are power. Picture it. Someone takes a shot at you in a meeting. A cheap public challenge. A line designed to make you defend yourself right now. The weak man jumps in immediately. He talks faster, explains too much, adds emotion, tries to clear his name before anybody even asked for a full defense. Now he looks rattled. Even if he is right, he looks unstable. The strategic man does something else. He breathes. He lets the words land. He refuses to feed the pace of the attack. Then maybe he says calmly, "That's one interpretation," or "We can examine that," or "Keep going." Notice the difference. He did not surrender. He did not retreat. He did not become passive. He simply refused to let another person choose the speed of his nervous system. That is what the gap protects. And here is something most men miss. The first 3 seconds are not just about composure. They are about intelligence. Because emotion narrows vision. It makes everything feel personal, immediate, and absolute. The gap widens vision again. Now you can ask the right questions. What is actually happening here? Is this a real threat or a baited performance? Does this require a response now, later, or never? Is the person in front of me seeking truth, dominance, attention, or chaos? Those questions do not appear in the mind of a reactive man. He is too busy defending his ego. But the gap creates a new kind of man. A man who does not just feel pressure. A man who studies pressure while inside it. And that changes everything. Because once you can pause, you can choose. And once you can choose, your emotions stop being the steering wheel and start becoming data. That is the reframe. Anger is data. Fear is data. Humiliation is data. Panic is data. Useful? Yes. Authoritative? No. Your feelings may report a threat. They do not get to dictate your move. That is command. And do not wait for a battlefield to train this. Use it in small moments. When a message annoys you, pause. When someone cuts you off, pause. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. When a cold tone makes your mind start racing, pause. Build the 3-second wall in low-stakes moments, and it will be there when the real pressure arrives. Because in crisis, you do not rise to your ideals, you fall to your training. If this way of thinking speaks to you, stay with me, because the gap is only the beginning. You can learn to delay reaction and still remain trapped inside the event. You can stay quiet and still be emotionally owned by what is happening. And that brings us to the deeper move. Because after you create the gap, you must change your position entirely. You must stop standing inside the storm. You must learn to observe it. Chapter 4. The Neutral Observer Technique. Most men suffer twice in a crisis. First from the event, then from the story they wrap around the event. This is unfair. This always happens to me. Why would they do this to me? How could they disrespect me like that? Why now? Why me? And just like that, the situation stops being a problem to solve and becomes a personal wound to bleed from. That is where emotional control collapses. Because the more personal the event feels, the harder it is to think cleanly inside it. So the next layer of the Stoic Shield is this. Stop experiencing pressure as the main character. Start analyzing it as the observer. This is not denial. It is repositioning. You mentally step half a pace outside yourself and watch the scene as if you were a strategist brought in to solve it. Not why is this happening to me, but what exactly is happening here? Not how dare they, but what is the motive, the leverage, and the pattern? Not I feel attacked, but an attack is being attempted. What is the most effective response? That shift sounds small. It is not small. It is the difference between drowning in the river and mapping the current. The crisis is not happening to you. It is just happening. You are just the one solving it. That line alone can harden a man, because when you stop personalizing everything, your emotional temperature drops. And once the temperature drops, perception improves. Now you notice details that panic would have hidden. Who is emotional in the room? Who benefits from urgency? Who is bluffing? Who is trying to force a rushed answer? What outcome are they quietly pushing you toward? That is why neutral observation is power. It restores pattern recognition. Imagine betrayal. You discover somebody lied to you, used you, or moved against you behind your back. The weak reaction is immediate combustion. Confront. Accuse. Rage. Demand answers. Leak pain all over the scene. Why does that fail? Because now the betrayer gets information. They see what hurt you most. They see where you are unstable. They see how to spin the story. And worst of all, they get to choose the battlefield while you are still bleeding. The strategic response is colder. Observe first. What changed? When did it change? What were the signals? What is proven and what is assumed? What is the cost of speaking too early? What advantage is gained by waiting one more day, one more hour, one more conversation? This does not make you passive. It makes you accurate. And accuracy under pressure is a deadly advantage. The same rule applies in chaos. A deadline blows up. A deal collapses. A public problem erupts. Everyone around you begins leaking stress and emotion into the air like smoke. That is the moment average men absorb the room. They catch the panic like a disease. But the neutral observer does something else. He watches the emotional weather without inhaling it. He notes who is spiraling, who is posturing, who is still useful, what is broken, what can be saved, what matters now, what can wait. He turns crisis into sequence. First this, then that. Simple, clean, mathematical. That is how pressure loses its mythology. Because most chaos is not actually overwhelming. It only feels overwhelming when emotion and event fuse together in your mind. Separate them, and the room gets quieter. The problem is still real. But now it is a problem, not an identity threat, not an ego wound, not proof that the universe is against you, just a problem. And problems can be solved. That is the hidden law. The man who can observe without absorbing becomes terrifyingly effective, because other people need emotional comfort before they can act. He does not. Other people need the room to feel good before they can think clearly. He does not. Other people drown in the meaning of the moment. He focuses on structure. That is rare, and rare is powerful. But there is still one more trap. Some men learn to control panic, rage, and humiliation, and then they ruin themselves through excitement, relief, and emotional highs. Because discipline is not only tested by pain, it is also tested by pleasure. And that is exactly why the next rule matters more than most men expect. Chapter 5. The Danger of Joy. Most men only think about emotional control when they are angry. That is a mistake, because uncontrolled pleasure can destroy judgment just as fast as uncontrolled pain. In some cases, even faster. A man in despair can be broken, but a man in emotional euphoria can be played. That is the danger of joy, not joy itself. Lack of discipline inside it, because the moment you become too excited, too relieved, too validated, too high on momentum, your guard drops, your mouth opens, your standards soften, your promises expand, your caution disappears. And that is when people get access. Watch what happens when a man gets the thing he wanted, the attention, the approval, the apology, the win, the breakthrough, the new relationship, the sudden opportunity. He starts leaning forward. He talks too much, trusts too fast, celebrates too early, shows how badly he wanted it. And in doing that, he reveals where he is still emotionally dependent. That dependence is visible. And visible dependence invites manipulation, because if someone learns what gives you emotional highs, they learn what you can be baited with: praise, hope, romance, recognition, fast rewards, future promises. The same man who thinks he is only vulnerable in anger is often wide open in excitement. He thinks because it feels good, it must be safe. Wrong. A weak man is obvious in disappointment. A strategic man also studies himself in victory. That is the line most people miss. You do not prove emotional mastery when life hurts you. You prove it when life flatters you. Can you receive good news without losing your shape? Can you get what you wanted without becoming careless? Can you feel the high without becoming drunk on it? That is discipline, because highs create attachment, and attachment creates fear of loss, and fear of loss makes men negotiable. That is how the trap closes. A man meets someone who finally gives him the attention he has been starving for. Now he is too available, too eager, too forgiving, too willing to ignore red flags because the emotional reward is flooding his system. Another man gets his first real taste of success. Now he is boasting, overcommitting, spending too fast, trusting the wrong people, mistaking applause for loyalty. Another man finally hears the words he needed from someone who once withheld them. Now his boundaries dissolve in seconds. This is why your highs must be governed with the same steel as your lows, because emotional spikes are spikes. The body does not care whether the surge came from anger or excitement. A surge is still a surge, and surges reduce precision. That is why the man who jumps for joy can easily be pushed into despair. He has the same structural weakness. His internal state is still externally controlled. Today they can lift him, tomorrow they can drop him. That is not sovereignty, that is dependency wearing a smile. So what is the strategic response? Receive everything. Chase nothing. Enjoy the win. But do not worship it. Appreciate the praise, but do not inhale it like oxygen. Feel the spark of possibility. But do not start building fantasies before reality has earned them. This is the rule. Never let a good feeling rush your standards. Let things prove themselves slowly. Let people prove themselves slowly. Let people prove themselves slowly. Let proteses prove themselves slowly. Let praise pass through you without rewriting your identity. Because the moment your emotional state rises and falls with external events, your center still belongs to the world. The Stoic Shield demands more. It demands emotional symmetry. Bad news does not own you. Good news does not own you either. Insult does not move you. Flattery does not move you. Loss does not collapse you. Victory does not intoxicate you. You remain difficult to steer in both directions, and that is rare. Most people are not manipulated through fear alone. They are manipulated through hope. Remember that. The promise, the maybe, the almost, the future reward dangled just close enough to keep them emotionally invested. That is why disciplined men do not just guard their anger, they guard their appetite. Because once you master both your highs and your lows, people can no longer lead you with pain or reward. And when that happens, your energy stops leaking into emotional swings. It becomes available for something far more dangerous. Execution. Chapter 6. Redirecting the heat. Because anger, humiliation, betrayal, frustration, all of it contains fuel. The only question is whether you waste that fuel in noise or turn it into output. Anger is expensive, so is resentment, so is betrayal, so is humiliation. They consume the body, they hijack focus, they tighten the jaw, cloud judgment, heat the blood, and beg for immediate release. That is why so many men explode. They think expression is relief. Punch the wall, send the message, start the argument, make the scene. Let them know exactly how furious you are. But that kind of release is usually theft. You are stealing from your future to satisfy your present, because the moment you discharge that energy recklessly, it is gone. The force that could have built something, sharpened something, corrected something, becomes noise in the air. A broken object, a ruined conversation, a leaked weakness. A few dramatic minutes you can never take back. That is a poor trade. Strategic men do something else. They redirect the heat. They do not pretend they are not angry. They do not suppress it into denial. They capture it. They convert it. That is the principle. Emotion is raw fuel. Behavior decides whether it becomes destruction or power. When betrayal hits, the weak man wants an audience. The strong man wants a plan. When humiliation hits, the weak man wants to react immediately. The strong man wants to become undeniable. When anger rises, the weak man burns outward. The strategic man burns inward, under control, like a furnace. That is the image. Not an explosion, a furnace, contained heat, directed force, useful pressure. So when the surge comes, ask a better question. Not, how do I release this right now? But, where can this energy be invested? Can it go into work, into training, into planning, into building skill, into tightening your systems, into outgrowing the environment that caused the insult in the first place? That is how pain becomes productive. Do not punch the wall. Use that aggression to work 4 extra hours tonight. Do not send the emotional paragraph. Use that energy to sharpen your position until your results speak with more violence than your words ever could. Do not waste fury on performance. Turn it into repetition. Turn it into discipline. Turn it into hours nobody sees. Turn it into a level of output that makes your old self look soft. This is where emotional compartmentalization becomes masculine in the deepest sense. Not because it is cold for the sake of coldness, because it refuses waste. A disciplined man hates waste. Waste of words, waste of time, waste of access, waste of energy. And emotional outbursts are usually waste disguised as honesty. Think about how many men ruin their own revenge by reacting too early. They reveal the wound. They announce the pain. They make the other person aware of the damage. Now the other side adapts, defends, hides, frames the story, prepares for impact, all because the man could not hold the heat. Silence would have served him better. Work would have served him better. Distance would have served him better. The strongest answer to betrayal is often not confrontation. It is elevation. Become harder to access, harder to provoke, harder to replace, harder to compete with. That is a cleaner form of force. And there is another advantage to redirected heat. It protects your identity. Because every time you transmute anger into disciplined action, you teach yourself a new truth. I do not need emotional release to regain power. That matters. A reactive man feels powerless until he vents. A disciplined man regains power the moment he begins directing himself. That shift is enormous. Now the feeling is no longer the master. It becomes the servant. Now betrayal is not just pain. It is signal. Now anger is not just heat. It is inventory. Now frustration is not just discomfort, it is available force waiting for orders. That is how the Stoic Shield becomes real in daily life. You get hit, you feel it fully, you reveal little, you waste nothing, and then you move quietly, deliberately, without the theater weak men mistake for strength. Because the loud man looks dangerous, the disciplined man becomes dangerous. And once you understand that, the final transformation comes into view. Because techniques are not enough. A pause is not enough. Observation is not enough. Even redirection is not enough. At some point, this stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. Chapter 7. The Unbreakable Core. Techniques matter. The pause matters. The trigger audit matters. The neutral observer matters. Redirecting the heat matters. But none of that is enough if, underneath it all, you still define yourself by what the world gives you. Because then your calm is temporary, your discipline is conditional, your peace is rented. And rented peace can always be revoked. That is why the final stage of the Stoic Shield is not tactical. It is identity. You stop asking, how do I stay calm in this moment? And you start becoming the kind of man for whom calm is the standard. Not because life is easy. Not because people are kind. Not because pressure disappeared. Because your inner state is no longer up for negotiation. That is the unbreakable core. It is the part of you that does not beg the world to behave so you can remain composed. It is the part that does not need fairness to stay disciplined. It is the part that does not need validation to stay stable. It is the part that says, quietly and without drama, You do not get access to my center. That line changes a man, because most men live with open gates. Anyone can enter. Anyone can disturb the peace. A text can do it. A tone can do it. A delay can do it. An insult can do it. An ignored message can do it. A bad day can do it. A stranger can do it. That is not strength. That is occupation. An unbreakable man closes the gates. He still feels. But feeling does not become leakage. He still cares. But care does not become dependency. He still engages. But engagance does not become surrender. His peace is guarded. He does not measure his day by applause. He does not measure his worth by attention. He does not measure his power by whether other people understood him. He measures it by one thing. Did I remain sovereign? That is the metric. Not did I win every interaction. Not did everybody approve. Not did I get the last word. Did I remain sovereign? Did I keep command of my face, my tongue, my breathing, my pace, my standards? Did I preserve clarity under pressure? Did I refuse to let emotion make decisions? My discipline should make. If the answer is yes, you are already becoming rare. Because the final form of this man is not loud. He does not perform stoicism. He does not walk around acting cold for effect. He does not turn discipline into theater. He simply becomes harder to move. He listens longer, speaks less, chooses slower, reacts later, observes first, answers with precision, leaves when respect is gone, stays silent when silence has more force than explanation, acts without needing to advertise intent. He is not numb. He is sealed, and that is why he becomes difficult to manipulate. Guilt hits him, but does not steer him. Urgency reaches for him, but does not rush him. Provocation circles him, but finds no handle. Flattery knocks, but does not enter. Fear rises, but does not command. Pleasure arrives, but does not corrupt his standards. He is no longer easy to pressure because he no longer worships emotional relief. That is the real graduation. When you stop needing to instantly discharge what you feel, the world loses one of its oldest weapons against you. Now understand the cost of not building this. If you stay reactive, life will train you like an animal. People will learn your pressure points. Your enemies will not need strength. They will only need timing. Your emotions will continue making promises your discipline cannot keep. And every year, you will wonder why you feel exhausted, disrespected, and strangely out of command inside your own life. But once you build this core, the opposite happens. Pressure becomes training. Insults become information. Delays become tests you no longer fail. Betrayal becomes instruction. Chaos becomes a field where your calm starts separating you from the crowd, and over time, a new identity hardens. You no longer chase peace, you carry it. You no longer perform control, you embody it. You no longer hope to stay calm. You become the man who does not break pattern just because the world raised its voice. So here is the oath, not a motivational line, a standard, a code. Read it like a decision. I do not give the outside world authority over my inner state. I do not rush because others are emotional. I do not explain because others are uncomfortable. I do not leak anger, panic, or excitement for public consumption. I feel everything. But I reveal only what serves the mission. My silence is not weakness. My restraint is not fear. My calm is not passivity. It is command. That is the Stoic Shield. And once a man truly puts it on, The world can still test him, but it can no longer drive him.